We should get rid of landlords, abolish them, Mao Zedong them. This is what so many people are saying right now. So let's actually discuss the numbers if we were to abolish landlords. I want you to imagine 3 years down the line, the new prime minister comes in and he or she says, we're going to get rid of landlords. We no longer need them. We're going to take over. So what do we do with the current landlords, apart from throw them in a pit, as many people would want to do? If the government want to get rid of landlords and take over the provision of accommodation for its citizens, then here's what I imagine the government's proposal would be. Landlords, we no longer need your assistance. We'll take over from here. We're going to buy your properties and you can walk away. Now, I don't assume the government's going to buy it at a premium. So let's run our numbers based on averages. How much will it cost the UK government to get rid of landlords? So if we look at data from the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, there are roughly around 5.4 million privately rented households in the UK. And the average house price is around 270,000 to around 280,000. So we're talking about 5.4 million houses multiplied by £270,000. So if the government were to abolish landlords and buy these houses at the average, the UK government would have to find £1.4 trillion. This opens up another can of worms. That's £1.4 trillion, not billion, not 140 million, 1.4 trillion to get rid of landlords. Now, for context, the entire UK GDP, gross domestic product, which means what we produce every single year as a nation, is around 2.9, maybe 3 trillion at a push. The entire NHS budget is around 180 billion per year. Costs the same as 8 years of the NHS just to buy the properties. So how would the government pay for this? Because it's all well and good saying let's abolish landlords. There are landlords with mortgages that needs to be repaid. There are landlords that have accrued equity, but we're going to work everything on the average. How will the government pay for this? Because the money is not just going to fall from the sky. Let's break this down. Let's say the government will fund 1.4 trillion by taxing employed people in the country. And in the UK, we have around 34 million working adults in the country. 1.4 trillion divided by the 34 million working adults, that's going to equal a tax bill of around £42,000 per working adult. So it means if you have a job, you are going to have to contribute towards getting rid of landlords. And to play your part, it's going to cost you £42,000, which is nearly a full-time salary for a working adult. If we consider that a full-time worker earns an average of around £37,000 per year. So that's nurses, teachers, firemen and firewomen, police, bus drivers, everyone will pay over 40 grand, £40,000 so that the government can buy these homes. Now remember, that doesn't include maintenance, repairs, or managing the properties after. That's just to buy these properties to get them into the government's hands from private landlords. Another option I wanted us to consider is the government could just borrow the money. Rather than taxing Tom, Dick and Harry, the government can just borrow the funds. The issue is the UK is already in 2.7 trillion national debt. If we add this 1.4 trillion, we're taking the national debt to around 4 trillion. That breeds a bigger issue. Based on, let's just say, today's interest rates, the government would be paying tens of billions every single year just in interest. Probably around 60, 70, 80 billion per year in interest. Again, where does that money come from? That's your tax-paying funds. Based on these numbers, that's the equivalent of doubling the defense budget or tripling, maybe even quadruple what we're currently spending on housing right now. So borrowing the money doesn't magically fix anything. In fact, I think it causes greater issues. Something many people will not take into consideration. This form of borrowing could lead to massive inflation, higher taxes, and most likely higher interest rates for every single person. So you will still pay for it in a roundabout, sly way. The truth is, it's not as simple as let's just abolish or get rid of landlords. In fact, it's nonsensical. It makes no sense. Yes, something does need to be done. I put my hands up, yes. But running around screaming and shouting that we need to abolish landlords and the government need to take over screams a lack of economic understanding. If the UK government try and nationalise the entire private rental sector, I predict that the market would collapse. Investors will pull out their funds, put their money into other opportunities. Many of our pension funds are investors in property. So your pension funds might fail. House building in general would stop, and confidence in the entire investment market, and I'm not just talking about housing as investment, I'm talking about everything, bonds, stocks and shares, the entire market will be impacted. Knowing our government, the only way they could do something like this and achieve something like this, unsuccessfully of course, would be to print money. But that ultimately would devalue your savings. But more importantly, it will catapult or send inflation through the roof. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But you've got to be mindful of the economic impact. Realistically, and I know this might be a painful conversation for many people because your hopes and dreams are with politicians that are promising to overhaul, abolish and Mao Zedong landlords. But getting rid of private landlords will effectively lead to less housing overall, more debt overall, and significantly higher buying prices across the board. So look, instead of trying to wipe out landlords, which will end up costing the average person much more money, my question is this: do you have 42,000, or would you be happy with an extra £42,000 in taxes or a tax liability to get rid of landlords? Hey guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you be willing to pay an extra £42,000 one-off to get rid of private landlords? But instead of wiping out private landlords, the smarter move would be to build more social housing, specifically social housing. Find or create systems to incentivize long-term rentals. Now, I know a lot of people will not want landlords to be incentivized, but if we promote and encourage long-term renting, that could help the average person. But more importantly, I think there needs to be greater punishments, greater fines, greater ways to penalize terrible and bad landlords. But the goal should never be to destroy the rental market because it will have greater impact on the average person. It should be to try and make it fairer, and that starts with making sure our government build more homes. We cannot put it on private landlords to build social housing. Private landlords are capitalists by nature. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad, but they are needed, whether you agree or not. Unfortunately, the math doesn't lie. It's going to cost the average person £42,000 just to get rid of landlords. And that's even before the government maintain your lift, change your light bulb, fix the sink, fix some damp. So next time someone shouts in the pub, ban landlords, maybe you should pull out this video and say to them, do you have £42,000 to contribute towards this cause? Hey guys, if you get any value from this video, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Please like, comment and subscribe.